very quickly about me, I feel like if you're going to come to a sports and fitness information setting, then you better be able to relate to the people you're talking to. So the photos up there that's me from my last Alaskan fishing trip about a month ago. Went up and caught some on the, that's a red salmon there. And I got a kayak and a mountain bike, so I wanted you to know that I relate to sport and fitness, although you might not be able to tell it from the slim physique that I carry around with me. And I'm from a firm called OVO. We lead a lot of innovation work, and today we're going to be talking about another step in the innovation journey that we find really important, and that is how do you get customer voice and customer insight into your product and service development. I want to talk a little bit and use a couple of slides to kind of bring home a point about customer insight. The first one is how we often celebrate the fact that since we haven't heard anything from customers, we must be doing okay. So the slides basically read, nope, haven't heard anything from customers. Perfect, that's great, we must be doing really well. The second one is one of my personal favorites. It actually comes out of software development. Many of you may have seen this slide before, but basically in the lower right corner is what the customer wanted, a rope swing. And along the way are the different groups or organizations within the organization and how they interpreted it based on what they heard or what they were told. The one there is how they were billed. The one over in the far bottom is how the project was documented, the absence of anything. The challenge is that customer insight, customer feedback is really important, but we often don't pay enough attention to it or understand how to do it effectively. So what I'd like to talk a little bit about is why it's important and what some of the different kinds of tools are, and then we're going to quiz the panel a lot on what their take on the different successes and challenges they've had. So many of you are probably familiar with the apocryphal saying that Henry Ford was asked how he knew to make an automobile. And his supposed answer was, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Now, we can't figure out whether Henry Ford ever said that, but the point he was making is that we tend to repeat the same things we know, and even if you ask a customer what they want, a lot of times they can't tell you what they want because they aren't sure either. That leads us to this idea of a hierarchy of needs and a hierarchy of discovery. And the idea behind that is there are different kinds of needs, overmet and undermet, unmet, and unarticulated. If any of you are familiar with the book Blue Ocean Strategy, you may recognize that sort of hierarchy of needs. What that then leads us to is this idea that the more innovative I want to be, the further I need to get to either unmet or unarticulated needs, because those are ones that customers will really value. What that says then on the right here is that the kind of research or the kind of interaction we may want to do may be different. Because traditionally, a lot of our research and our market development is around existing products and existing customers, which we do really well. But as you move further and further into unmet or unarticulated needs, then you can see that that's going to increase in difficulty, increase in time, but the value proposition of that research is much, much more exponential. So how do you get there, and what kinds of tools, what kinds of methods, and what kind of discoveries can you make? And that's really what the panel is going to be talking about for the next about 45 minutes. So I want to talk very quickly about a couple of techniques and tools we'll be talking about. Some you may be familiar with, some you may not be. Obviously, one-on-one interviewing with a customer, very familiar market research strategy, as is a customer or a customer advisory board or some type of an expert panel, even going so far as a traditional focus group. These are sort of tried and true methods where you're talking to one or a multiple of your customers or prospects. Somewhat less traditional but very valuable are things like customer prototyping. The more quickly I can put a sample or an example or a prototype in front of a customer, allow them to use it and get feedback from them, the more quickly I can get really relevant feedback. The reason I showed my mountain bike earlier was because the actual mountain bike industry was built from a group of, based on a group of people who were riding and building their own mountain bikes. The original mountain bikes were built by a bunch of hobbyists and enthusiasts. That's a picture from one of the earliest ones that were built, and they were building it themselves. Many of you in your industry, especially in the sports and fitness industry, will find people who are enthusiasts, who are building new products on the fly or taking and cobbling together existing products to solve problems that aren't being solved. Those people are called lead users. If you can find those lead users, you can find a lot of innovation. The last one here that I recommend, and we do a lot of, is what's called ethnography. Ethnography is just a big fancy word for following around your customers to see how they actually use your product and what gaps or experiences they're looking for to be filled by your product. So ethnography is a pretty common tool as well. Two other tools I want to talk about very quickly that don't have to do with interacting with customers are first, the strategy canvas, again from the Blue Ocean Strategy, a tool we talk about a lot. And the second one I'll encourage you to think about is this idea of a customer experience journey. And that is the totality of the experience the customer has using your product, from the time they acquire it, to they use it, to frustrations they may have with it, to getting support calls or help on the support line, until they end of life your product. That entire journey matters to a customer, and that's the way they actually think about the consumption of your product. So these are tools that you can use without customers. The other ones are typically with customer interaction. But let's say you've managed to get a lot of insight. And one of the things we're going to talk to the panelists about is, let's say I've gotten insight. What do I do with it? How do I begin to take that insight and assess it and make sense of it and interpret it into such a way that I can begin to put it into new products and services? So what we would call sense making. This is probably the most important and probably least understood part of the customer voice process. It's not too hard to get insight. It is often hard to translate that insight into what it means and to prioritize it. So we'll be talking a little bit about that challenge as well with the panel.